长生尽心灵。飞至远行佛山中，腾云观开菩提林。人间菩萨一念心，愉悦净土在人间。增长一切诸善法，去一切佛出离，坚定高心力宏愿，爱洒众生尽心灵。飞至远行佛山中，腾云观开菩提林。人间菩萨一念心，愉悦净土在人间。心是成圣为大地，慈悲喜舍为和风，智慧妙法为净水，明清净净为阳光。 心是长生伟大的叶子，内系社会和风，智慧要化为清水，引前荆棘为阳光。
Both here at the Jingsi Abode and joining us online. Welcome to tonight's event in the Tzu Chi Studies lecture series. 各位法师、各位师兄师姐、各位线上的观众朋友，大家晚安！欢迎参加今天晚上慈济研究系列讲座。今天的主题是慈济绘本为儿童呈现具象化的环保理念。若您需要即时翻译，请在房间的后面拿取翻译接收机，线上观众可以选择中文频道或者原音频道收看。如果您是在活动之后再看录影的影片，可以选择中文或者英文字幕。Please note that the lecture will be primarily in English, but I will speak mostly in Mandarin, as much of our audience on site is Mandarin speaking. Online viewers can follow along via original audio or translated live stream. If you are watching the recording after the event, there will be English and Chinese subtitles available. 今天的讲座里的主角是一本童书，是静思人文出版的《我爱蔬果，我爱地球》。这本书的构想来自于静思精舍的德环法师。今天我们非常荣幸邀请到德环法师与我们分享他对这本书的想法和期许。法师。
上人、各位教授、兄护执行长以及各位菩萨们，晚安。今天是一个平安的夜晚，我们非常感恩，杨柳台风这样的快速的通过，让我们的灾情降到最低，那灾民的损失降到最少。由此可知，平安是非常的不容易得到的，所以我们拥有平安要非常的珍惜。很感恩，在今天晚上，我们的贺教授，在百忙中播出他宝贵的时间，来跟我们分享静思人文在2018年出版的儿童硬体书，书名是《我爱蔬果，我爱地球》，以及贺教授也研习的一些儿童读物。我们很高兴贺教授对教育、儿童教育的重视跟环保的重视。那我们上人告诉我们，教育要从小开始扎根，教育也是人类的希望。我们从静思书轩小志工的身上，我们看到的希望。 因为这些小志工跟上人的因缘非常深，非常深，仿佛是乘愿而来。因为他们上人所讲的话，他们依教奉行，深信不疑，而且身体力行。所以他们年纪虽小，可是他们心地清净、纯净、单纯，所以他们也有一股很有影响力，所以影响了他的父母、他的亲友还有同学。所以就是因为这样的因缘，让我觉得这些小志工他做得到的事情，我们大人不见得就做得到。譬如说吃素，很多人来跟上人讲，上人劝素好像比较困难，劝善比较容易耶。那我们那时候就觉得，吃素有这么困难吗？那小孩子都做得到啊，所以我们就觉得说，小志工这个力量也是不可忽视的，所以我们就以他的形，你看他的外形，就是净思学小志工，看了大家人见人爱嘛，他们心中有爱，所以说以他们为主题，然后书中呢，这书里面有很多的画面，让他看了好像世界很和平，人本来应该就很快乐，可是书里面有一些画面，又让人家起了非常不忍心，就像一些猪什么，好像被杀了那种惊恐，还有那种害怕，还有无奈的表情。所以我希望有这样的一本书，能够启发人人的慈悲心，进而看到这个地球，因为要养殖很多的动物，然后付出很大的代价，人类要付出很大的代价，所以希望说，人人能够，应该是要有点觉悟啦。上人讲的来不及，来不及，因为地球只有一个，没有地球，真的也就没有人类。那希望人人能够对这颗地球多尽一点心力来保护它，这样我们才有一个美好的明天。感恩大家聆听。
感恩德焕法师。所以德焕法师跟我们分享了他在构想这本书的时候，他心里想的事情，也给我们鼓励，说我们大家都要继续觉悟。那么接下来我们邀请慈济基金会的代表熊世民副执行长上台致辞，感恩熊副。
亲爱的上人，金色师父，叶教授，还有我们的戴莲教授，还有与会的各位在座的贵宾，还有我们在座以及线上的朋友、慈济人，大家晚安。很高兴今天能够在这个慈济研究系列讲座中，欢迎从美国 Virginia 来的这个我们的 Natasha Heller， 就我们翻译成贺奈贤教授那中文非常好那这次我们了解慈济研究的这个系列讲座那我们是对长期在这个慈济研究的资深学者来研究的成果。那我们也知道慈济的现象在这个很多元的视角那我们跨这个宗教学那社会学、人类学还有伦理各方面，经济学也是整个就是展现了慈济研究的面向。那这一次很感恩我们这个贺教授那 它本身是对这个汉传的佛教非常这个有造诣的这个学者哦。那他中文的造诣也是非常非常的好。那我们知道他的跟慈济的因缘也是非常的殊胜。我们了解，在1996年的时候，他还在台湾师范大学读书的时候，哦，那就到我们慈济文化中心哦来当这个志工哦。那我今天也打了电话问了一下，也确实是大家记得这位哦。那也到过花莲来访，也当过慈济的志工哦。那亲身体会到，就是说只要做一件小事，也可以帮助别人哦，那的真实力量哦。这非常感恩。那今天晚上贺教授就是以这本书哈，就是刚刚的绘本哦，就是我爱蔬菜，我爱地球这个绘本来跟大家做一个好例子哦。那分享我们的慈济尤其是在这儿童哦，都拟人化哦，那怎么样利用的科学语言儿童我们的各种作为哦。来做这个等于是一个这个环保的理念的代言人哦，来这个做一个理论，还有这实际的操作。同时，我们也知道这个儿童他除了茹素那之外，他也会影响他的家人甚至朋友一起来茹素救地球哦。那我们非常感恩这个Professor Heller 哈，这一次我们非常欢迎他啊，那也。希望今天晚上大家的这个讲座非常成功。那我们也欢迎贺教授常常回花莲哦，那常常回来金色。谢谢大家啊！我们预祝这次的这个讲座非常成功。我们谢谢两位我们语坛人能够来协助叶教授还有戴爱莲教授，感恩大家，谢谢。
感恩首副执行长。So now we will get ready to welcome Professor Heller to deliver tonight's lecture. 接下来我们就请贺奈贤教授上台。像熊父刚刚说的，贺奈贤教授是在美国的维吉尼亚州大学任教，他长期关注佛教教育与儿童文学。那么在1996年他来到台湾的时候，的确他就到慈济的外文编译部就做志工。那么这几天呢，他在精舍里，他也是有到大寮帮忙准备我们大家的食物，还有到菜园里面去出坡，所以跟大家都完全打成一片哦。那么今天晚上，他就将以《我爱蔬果，我爱地球》这本书作为主题，来跟我们引导跟分享，在儿童怎么来实践环保理念。感恩贺教授。
Thank you for inviting me to share my research tonight and for the warm welcome I've received here over the last few days. I especially want to thank Shui for organizing this visit and my talk. This talk will use a close reading of 我愛蔬果，我愛地球 to examine how Tzu Chi's children's literature approaches environmental education. In this picture book, we see animals anthropomorphized, the use of scientific language and concepts, and the representation of children as religious agents. I will contextualize these three strategies within Tzu Chi's children's literature more broadly, and then consider how they work together in 我愛蔬果，我愛地球 to make an argument for vegetarianism as an environmental action that children can take. If I can sum up my conclusion at the beginning, when we look at these three dimensions of this picture book, we see that empathy plus knowledge equals action, environmental action in this case. Before I turn to the picture books themselves, I want to say a few words about why I think this material is important to include in the study of Buddhism and the study of religion more broadly. I also want to talk about the scope of my larger project in that context. First of all, the study of Buddhism in the United States and in Europe has tended to focus on canonical texts, broadening over the last couple of decades to include materials that represent non-monastic approaches and interpretations. For the pre-modern period, scholars are limited in what they can study by those sources that survive until the present day. And of course, the Buddhist canon is essential in this regard. This material does not represent the full breadth of Buddhist practice in earlier times. Surely, young children must always have been learning from their parents and learning about Buddhism. Sometimes they appear in Buddhist images, and this gives us an idea that they were indeed learning from their parents, suggesting how they might have been part of rituals or listening alongside their parents to Buddhist teachings. For the modern and contemporary periods, however, we have a much wider range of materials. The impetus for my book project came from noticing that picture books were among the publications produced by Taiwanese Buddhist organizations. Tzu Chi is notable in this regard, with a long-standing commitment to creating materials for children. These materials can be understood in the context of childhood education programs and the lived experience of children, but they also stand alone as examples of Buddhist literature. My book's premise is premised on the idea that these books should be taken seriously in this way. Having read a lot of picture books, this seems obvious to me. They are thoughtfully crafted, both in terms of text and pictures, and indeed this points to a way that picture books may be more sophisticated than materials aimed at adults. In this way, I am following in the lead of picture book scholarship, a subset of academic research on children's literature, and bringing it into dialogue with Buddhist studies. That I am going to focus on one book tonight reflects my commitment to taking picture books and other children's literature seriously. Close readings such as the one I will offer tonight are common for scriptures and other literary works, and picture books also support this kind of sustained attention from scholars. Picture books are characterized by the combination of words and images, which work together in a variety of ways. Picture books are also distinguished by the fact that they have a dual audience. Intended for children who are too young to read independently, picture books are usually assumed to be read out loud by an adult, and so authors and illustrators may address this audience, this adult audience, as well as a child audience. So if I think picture books are important, and I hope to persuade you of this by the end of my talk, if you are not already convinced, this is not a widely shared view. To illustrate this, look at the entry for the book I will be discussing this evening in WorldCat, which is an online catalog of research libraries in the United States. You can see that no library holds it. Well, you can't see that, but it is true that there is no library that has it in the WorldCat subscription. That's what it says. No libraries hold this item. Perhaps this is not surprising, as children's books are specialized collections. They're not always purchased by academic libraries. But the fact that no library in the United States actually owns this book reinforces the limits on the study of Buddhism. There's no way to study this book, really, in the United States unless you own a copy. In my book, I read Buddhist picture books in the context of Buddhist literature, but also in the context of picture books more broadly. The book that I'm using as a case study this evening is 我愛蔬果, 我愛地球, published in 2018, as we've heard. It is a board book with thick cardboard pages that are easier for very young hands to turn and unable to be ripped. The title of the book is in relatively small characters, as you can see, relatively small characters underneath the basket. It is also in the shape of a little girl, and I will return to this dimension of the picture book towards the end of my talk. This book does not have a plot or narrative, but begins by presenting the world as sick, and offers vegetarianism as a practice that both responds to the illness of a too warm earth and that expresses respect and care for animals. children are shown to be capable not only of being vegetarian, but of advocating for vegetarianism. So let's start by paying attention to animals. Oops. The little girl on the cover is surrounded by a number of them, and they're not drawn to scale. If you look at the cow's head in the lower corner, you'll see that it is angled just as it has a tilt to it, and it's angled just as the little girl's head is, and the cow is also smiling, just as the little girl is smiling. You can see how their smiles are similar. Now, I live in an area where I drive by cows almost every day, and the cows I drive by are happily out in open fields, and they mostly look like this, which is to say that they do not have a discernible facial expression. So this smiling cow brings me to the first section of my paper, the role of anthropomorphism of animals in literature for children. On the first pages of this book, we see a continuation and intensification of the anthropomorphism gestured at on the cover. The smiling cow has returned, along with a giraffe, a monkey showing care for a younger monkey, a bear in a flower necklace, and a pig standing upright in a party hat. All of these illustrations show animals as somehow like us, like human beings, in what they do and what they enjoy. Most interesting is the rabbit, whose forepaws are raised in imitation of the little boy's, returning his gesture of respect. Although subtle, this illustration suggests how human beings and animals should relate. This anthropomorphism continues throughout. Dancing animals on the last page, chickens exhibiting various poses of distress as one of them is yanked upward by a human hand, and the anthropomorphism extends even to the earth itself, which is depicted as feverishly sick. The animals shown in these ways emphasize their cuteness. For example, that you can see here that they have oversized heads. The pig's head down below is nearly the same size as its body. This signals that they are babyish and that they have other qualities of cuteness. So that this makes them animals and plants that are depicted this way seem as if they need care. These are the same strategies that any children's book would use to make plants and animals appealing. Making animals cute and making them seem like humans in their emotions and activities is very common in children's books and in picture books especially. In Tzu Chi picture books, it is used to help impart knowledge and to encourage empathy for animals and even plants. So let us consider two other examples of Tzu Chi picture books aimed at a slightly older audience. The story of the ancestor of trees is in this book, and it centers on a piece of coal that falls off a truck, leading it to explain to a nearby tree how it too was once a tree. The process to become coal takes such a long time that even though the coal seems newly dug from the earth, it is much older than the tree. The little piece of coal is equipped with eyes, a small nose, and a mouth. The two trees with whom the coal converses are also furnished with eyes, noses, and mouths. The story only occupies a few pages, but this is enough to establish that each has an identifiable personality and speaking style. There's also a lizard, not shown here, who helps to move the conversation forward. The little piece of coal, despite being the eldest, is the character through which focalization, meaning that it is the focus point for children, through which focalization occurs. As the smallest, the coal is the most childlike of the characters depicted, and it must explain itself to adult figures who seem to know better than the coal does. Depicting the lump of coal as cute makes it more appealing and therefore more likely that the reader or listener can easily sympathize with its challenges. Although there is no real danger in this story, the trees cannot move, the narrative tension hinges on how successfully the little piece of coal can communicate the reality of how trees and how coal are related. Another Tzu Chi picture book, Little Secrets of Animals, opens with a story about a rhinoceros who is very itchy, a consequence of the parasitical insects that live on her skin. A bird comes to her aid, taking up residence on her back and eating the insects. The rhinoceros calls the bird her private doctor, And the bird also aids the rhinoceros by alerting her to the presence of a hunter, which the rhinoceros then chases off. Contemplating the gun dropped by the hunter in this illustration, the bird tells the rhinoceros that it contains tranquilizer darts that would allow the hunter to take her horn off and sell it. Shocked, the rhinoceros acknowledges that her poor eyesight would be her downfall if not for the help of the bird. The narrative goes on to provide more information about the habits of the rhino. We see it wallowing in mud, and then a young sika deer comments to its mother that the rhinoceros is very dirty. The deer mother explains that this is the way for rhinos to protect their skin and to ward off mosquitoes. There are lots of talking animals in this story, and they all serve to impart knowledge about the rhinoceros. In the course of these few pages, the reader learns about the symbiotic relationship between the rhinoceros and the bird, why the rhinoceros is a threatened species, and the reason behind the rhino's unclean and unattractive appearance. The story does not tell readers what to believe or think, but provides them with information that helps to understand how human practices are connected to the animal world. There are clear takeaways. We see here animals working cooperatively, and the threats posed to animals by human behavior, as well as the misunderstandings that can arise when one species judges another by its own standards. That the animals are given voices and made very cute in the case of this rhinoceros makes it easier for readers to grasp their perspectives. The rhinoceros and the bird chat together like friends, and the dialogue between the two deer mimics human parent-child interactions. The scientific knowledge is imparted in such a way as to also help the child reader see the world from the animal's point of view. In her preface to this book, author Zheng Hui makes clear the link she sees between understanding and protecting, writing, and this is the first quote, "To make children understand animals, draw near to animals, and to protect animals is a very important and interesting task. Conservation, protection of animals must be preceded by knowledge and conveyed in a language appropriate to children. And acquisition of knowledge is facilitated by positive emotions. Finding the animals adorable and relatable helps readers to learn about them." Elsewhere, Zheng connects the intellectual development with intellectual growth in this second quote, writing that by widening children's intellect, one is also able to promote attachment between parent and child, making the family more harmonious. So stories about animals have positive social effects even when they do not explicitly address human behavior. As we will see, the emotional dimension of these stories will become more prominent as the topics move closer to the child reader's body and self, what they do. So looking at the world from the perspective of a talking animal or plant can encourage empathetic behavior in a general way. The coal in interesting plants serves to focalize the reader's attention, as does the rhinoceros in Little Secrets of Animals. Like most of the other animals depicted, he has an oversized head, big eyes, and short limbs, as we have just seen. The sika deer have big eyes and long eyelashes, and they wear clothes. These characteristics, although not realistic, help us to imagine animals as being like us. The effects of looking carefully at the world of animals may help to form environmental attitudes later in life, especially if children are not immersed in nature, and this is true for many children worldwide. A study in Australia found that when adults involved in environmental protection were asked to recall their favorite childhood reading material, they were more likely to name fictional accounts of nature than strictly scientific books. For the authors of this study, this suggested that fantasy and imagination were important in creating pro-environmental worldviews. Sociologist Bengt Larsen points to how eco-edutainment fits into the pedagogical attitudes found in what he calls advanced liberal democracies. Children are expected to be autonomous and active and to participate in, quote, their own socialization into responsible citizens and ecological selves. This early learning is part of an expected lifelong education that, again in Larsen's words, places individuals in a greater space of responsibility, morally and geographically, end quote, with regard to environmental problems. One of the goals of 我愛蔬果, 我愛地球, is to increase concern for animals, both those like the chickens and pigs that are raised for food, and those that are impacted by climate change, such as polar bears. This is the illustration of the polar bears, and it makes the point very eloquently. A mama polar bear and her baby have been trapped on this very small patch of ice in a vast sea. So, as I have begun to suggest, anthropomorphized animals can help make scientific information more approachable to children. This is perhaps nowhere clearer than in the Tzu Chi book, The New Coronavirus Declassified, which was published in June 2020, just months after the coronavirus was declared a global pandemic. The books in the Public Medicine for Children series all contain a fair amount of information about the science behind the illness and its treatment. The New Coronavirus Declassified, however, is exceptional in this regard. The narrative begins with the most respected virologist of an imaginary country explaining the different kinds of scientists who are doing research on the new coronavirus and the precautions they must take in the lab. The virologist then explains the composition of a coronavirus, including that it is neither living nor non-living, how it differs from other viruses, and the history of infectious diseases. She says that the coronavirus, known as COVID-19, likely jumped from bats to humans, elaborating that infections from bats were once not likely because of infrequent contact, but because humans have destroyed the natural environment and encroached on the territory of the bats, even eating them at times, the risk of infection has increased. The virologist continues by explaining how the virus is transmitted, what happens once it is in the lungs, symptoms, treatments, and preventative measures. This brief summary cannot capture the scope and level of detail of this book, The New Coronavirus Declassified, which skillfully combines public health, the science of viruses, and the process of scientific research in such a way that even well-educated adults are likely to learn from it. The author's note at the story's conclusion highlights the social dimensions that are implied in the story. Liu Jun is the president of Tzu Chi University here and a molecular neuroscientist. She was invited to write this book, The New Coronavirus Declassified, by the Tzu Chi Culture and Communication Foundation, signaling that the publishers felt that this was an important topic, meriting a prominent author with exceptional scientific credentials. Although the objective of the book is to provide timely information on COVID-19, Liu takes the opportunity to counteract the stereotype that senior scientists must be men by making the virologist a woman. The interrelationship of humans and their environment is also important to Liu. We wanted to make clear, she writes, that we wanted to make the viruses cute because everything in the world is interdependent. If humans are able to respect the lives of other species and cherish the environment, then the chances of hostile encounters with viruses and other sources of diseases will be diminished. Here, Liu reinforces a point made earlier with regard to human interactions with bats, which also connects the two domains in which Tzu Chi is particularly active, medicine and the environment. Liu also points to the importance of aesthetics, cuteness, in shaping affective or emotional responses that in turn have real societal effects. Children's picture books are an important vehicle for scientific education. In her author's note, Liu relates a conversation she had with a friend, the prize-winning children's author Xing Jiahui. Xing teased Liu that scientific research is read by only a few hundred people, while picture books reach a much wider audience and influence both the children who are the primary readers and the adults who share the books with them. Xing encouraged her friend to translate her scientific knowledge into picture book format. Liu took from this conversation the importance of reaching different age groups as a way of enlarging the influence of scientific research. Liu's concern with multiple audiences for public health information has a parallel with creating Buddhist literature for children as a means of reaching different audiences and expanding influence. 我爱蔬果 我爱地球 also uses scientific rhetoric to persuade children to take up vegetarianism. It does so through the use of terms such as carbon dioxide, methane, and infectious disease. which are more sophisticated vocabulary items than are found in most board books. The use of terms such as carbon dioxide also assumes that readers understand that the atmosphere is made up of gases that must be balanced in a particular way. This is not explained in the book itself, which only points out that plants absorb carbon dioxide without explaining why this would be desirable. Here, the implied adult reader might break away from the text of the book to add their own explanation of carbon dioxide and its function in the atmosphere. Scientific rhetoric is also present in the use of statistics, that there are 8.7 million species on Earth, that 100 million animals are slaughtered each year, that this amounts to 1,000 animals killed each second. Even the section on what to eat reflects a scientific approach, arguing that legumes contain the same kind of nutrition that meat does. The scientific explanation of why one should practice vegetarianism adds to standard Buddhist arguments. Fundamentally, the reason that Buddhists do not eat meat is rooted in the injunction against killing. This rule has been interpreted in various ways as it relates to the consumption of meat. In Buddhist history, first it was initially intended to apply only to monks and nuns, and was understood to mean that animals could not be slaughtered for their benefit. Meat received on begging rounds was acceptable. That Buddhist monastics are wholly vegetarian in China and consequently in Taiwan is a result both of new translations of scriptures and of lay practice. Vegetarianism as a Buddhist practice became firmly rooted in China during the medieval period. Even before vegetarianism was standard monastic practice, it had been taken up by lay Buddhists, building not only on Buddhist scriptures, but on earlier traditions of fasts and diet restriction, as well as ideals of compassion. The most prominent lay Buddhist to practice vegetarianism was Emperor Wu of the Liang dynasty, Liang Wudi, who not only abjured meat himself, but also held imperial debates on the matter of monastic vegetarianism, and eventually issued an edict banning Buddhist monastics from eating meat. The advocacy for vegetarianism began during the early 6th century, and this proved determinative for Buddhist practice going forward. Vegetarianism further found support in the Brahmanet Sutra, which contains precepts to be conferred on lay Buddhists. In addition to the major precept that forbids killing, this scripture also includes a minor precept that explicitly addressing the consumption of meat, arguing that it stunts compassion. In short, from the medieval period onward, Buddhist monastics were expected to be vegetarian, and lay Buddhists very often were, at least for some periods of time. It became part of the way that Chinese Buddhists signaled their religious identity. In short, vegetarianism has long been part of the ethical practice for Buddhists, and in contemporary times, scientific arguments have been added to religious ones. The use of scientific rhetoric in 我愛蔬果, 我愛地球 suggests that this is an important way of looking at the world, one that exists alongside of moral persuasion. And moral persuasion is important. Arguably, it is the uniting thread of the book, which starts with a quotation from Master Zheng Yan. Brief quotations from her appear on several of the pages. Let's focus on how children are presented as Buddhist practitioners and ethical agents. This begins with their clothing. The little girl on the cover is dressed in a white shirt and dark blue pants. The apron that she wears follows this color scheme, as do her socks and shoes and the ribbons in her hair. Blue and white, of course, are the colors of the Tzu Chi uniform, and it is as easily recognizable on this book cover as it is in the streets of any city. Most of the children in the book are depicted as wearing clothes in a range of colors and styles, but this cover image and the image of 3 young volunteers midway through the book mark out an identity as a Tzu Chi member, as Tzu Chi members as a possibility for children. Richard Madsen notes the significance of the term zhigong instead of the more common term for volunteer, yigong. Rather than emphasize the voluntary aspect, zhigong conveys obligation and, in Madsen's words, an enlightened acceptance of one's duties towards others, end quote. This uniform is a visual way to signal that one is a Tzu Chi person. another expression used to indicate mission and identity. In this book, Tzu Chi identity is further defined as one that cares for all beings and the planet through vegetarianism. Compassion is linked to environmentalism. After offering examples of animals that are vegetarian, I Love Fruits and Vegetables turns to children who have promoted vegetarianism. The book concludes with an explanation of how to eat healthily as a vegetarian, and in its last line, ties vegetarianism back to the environment. Beginning with, and it ends with this quote, beginning with eating vegetarian, we can work together for the well-being of Earth and live happily together with animals. The illustration that accompanies this perspective reflects the happiness that this will result in, with a little girl dancing in the forest with a chicken, goat, pig, rhinoceros, all anthropomorphized to varying degrees. This mode of depicting animals, cute and like humans, reinforces with what Lena Verturi has termed ontological continuity, the idea that all beings in the 6 paths of rebirth are not as different as their current forms would suggest. When cows smile in the same way that little girls do, it is easy to see why one should not eat the other. Vegetarian has been seen as a Buddhist practice appropriate for children for at least a century. In Chen Hailiang's A Child's Buddhist Primer, vegetarianism is introduced at the very first level of the readings. The concluding portion of the text focuses on the treatment of animals. Children are told that animals have mothers and fathers, all fear death just as people do, and should be protected. Humans have a special role because they are king among the animals, and excessive killing reflects a bad king. The final line of this text reads, "Do not kill animals to eat, always protect life. Little friends, you must put this into practice." Not eating meat is presented as a core Buddhist practice alongside recitation of the Buddha's name and reading scriptures. The importance of keeping a vegetarian diet is reiterated in the subsequent 6 levels of instructions. Interspersed throughout this section are reprinted illustrations by Feng Zikai. Many of these illustrate non-killing, further emphasizing the importance of keeping vegetarian. Its presentation of vegetarianism in this book as an essential Buddhist practice for children marks an important moment in constructing Buddhism as specifically for children. We see this also in a much later Buddhist children's book published in 1978 titled A Journey to the Western World of Extreme Happiness. In this book, the children win a magical rocket trip to the Western Pure Land, where they experience all the wonders there. One scene describes a magical banquet at which whatever the children order immediately appears on the table before them. You can see the bowls flying down from above. The children know to order soy braised tofu, fried cashews, steamed lotus root, bitter melon and tofu skin, mushrooms with bean sprouts, and seaweed soup, along with many kinds of fruit, all of it vegetarian. Returning to 我愛蔬果, 我愛地球, making the material form of the book in the shape of a young Tzu Chi volunteer points in an almost literal way to the formation of children through the reading of the book and the actions promoted in it. It is not, in this book, we do not see adults telling children to be vegetarian. Rather, testimony from children shows readers examples of their peers being both vegetarian and advocating for it. A 5-year-old volunteer observes that plants can just regrow, while when animals die, they are reborn. A 9-year-old is quoted as saying, "Animals are our friends, and having them killed for the sake of a meal is inhumane." Some of the children are named. Little Shen points out the illogic of eating fish to become smarter, because humans are clearly smarter than fish already, while Roro is careful not to step on ants when she was walking. The list of exemplary children concludes with praise for their good hearts, which cannot bear to harm animals, and a hope that other little friends can join them in eating vegetarian. By taking the shape of the little girl, the book presents itself as one such friend who will open the reader to other friendships based on vegetarianism. I Love Fruits and Vegetables presents children as autonomous religious actors. Not only do the children in the book act as Buddhists by being vegetarian, but they can also persuade others to do so. Children can cultivate affinities with other children, leading to social religious action. But before I turn to some concluding remarks, I want to look more carefully at one double spread of 我愛蔬果, 我愛地球, to show how scientific knowledge, empathetic anthropomorphism, and ethical action work together. The text discusses in simple ways how practices of feeding animals to promote growth and larger animals, to increase profits when they are sold for meat, often sacrifices the health of animals. Then culling or even mass slaughter becomes a necessity. The following page offers statistics about the number of animals killed, conveying the seriousness of this with the use of red characters. Note both that this is the only place in the text with red characters, and that one does not need to be able to read the characters to understand that distinguishing them in this way, by making them red, conveys urgency and importance. This portion of the text corresponds to what I've been calling the scientific knowledge dimension of the book. As I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, text and illustrations carry equal weight in picture books, but the relationship can vary. Sometimes illustrations reflect the text straightforwardly. Sometimes they can show a perspective on the narrative that is subtly different from the words, and sometimes the gap between illustration and text is even greater. Here, the illustration does not follow the text. Rather, the illustration elicits empathy through anthropomorphism. The text talks about animals as a general category, but never mentions chickens. We do not see the chickens being fed or slaughtered, actions which feature prominently in the text. Instead, we see a group of them expressing fear and sadness as one member is taken away. Of the adult birds, 4 have tears in their eyes. 1 even wipes a tear with her wing. Chickens do not cry tears. They can't. But instead, they make noises that indicate negative emotions. The tears here are a way of giving emotion to their open beaks that we can see visually. 2 of the chicks have fallen down, presumably as a result of the chaos of one of their group being snatched away. But the chicks also serve to convey sociality. The chickens, like the humans, are groups with parents and children. We can imagine a reader listening to the text and looking at the pictures. These are the animals that are fed unhealthy things and then are culled because of illness. These 2 elements are framed by text that evokes the agency of the reader. The dark blue and red text are objective in tone, stating the facts of factory farming. The lighter blue text, which opens the page, and the dark brown or black text that closes the page are about attitudes humans can take. They should love, 疼爱, animals, and respect, 尊重, all life. As important are the verbs that signal that these lines are addressing the reader, or are words that signal that these lines are addressing the reader. Together, 一起, we should love animals, and our respect for all living beings is because we cherish our own 自我. We can change our attitudes based on scientific knowledge and empathy for animals, elicited by representing them in ways that make them more like humans. So empathy plus knowledge equals action. This book accomplishes its goal by bringing together anthropomorphized animals with scientific knowledge so as to inspire action, modeled here by the children themselves. Vegetarianism makes plain that the connection between environmentalism and Buddhist identity. Scientific research on health and the environment can be deployed to support Buddhist ethical teachings about non-killing and the care of animals. Further, non-killing of animals has a greater and clearer urgency in the Buddhist moral universe than more abstract aims of conservation and environmental protection. The board book, I Love Fruits and Vegetables, I Love the Earth, connects environmentalism with non-killing. And from the first-person pronoun used in the title to the children depicted in Tzu Chi uniforms, it situates vegetarianism within the formation of Buddhist identity and the shaping of global eco-citizens. Thank you.
非常谢谢贺教授很深刻的分析。所以接下来呢，我们有请台湾师范 大学永续管理与环境教育研究所的叶新成教授，以及慈济大学宗教与人文研究所戴爱莲教授一起上台，也请贺老师一起在上台，3位老师来分享他们的观点与回馈。那我们有请叶教授来主持讨论。
It's my pleasure and honor to have the chance to be the host for the panel discussion after Professor Heller's very inspiring speech. I think we will have about maybe 20 minutes. And at first, I would like to invite 戴爱莲教授, Professor DeVido, to share her viewpoints and insights to Professor Helen's speech.
好吗？哦呀，哦，谢谢，师父们好，大家好。我要用中文，英文讲好不好？Okay, I better use English, but thank you so much. So I'm very happy to know about Professor Heller's latest research on Tzu Chi. As we all know, there was a wave of scholarship in the early 2000s, like 2000 to 2010. There was a lot of English books about Tzu Chi at that time, but they were mostly sociology and talking about Tzu Chi is an NGO, which is good, which is fine. But I often am shocked because there's so many, Tzu Chi has so much literature, so many books, and hardly any foreign scholars have talked about all the books that Tzu Chi has produced. So, including the children's books. So that's why Professor Heller, it's very important because she's actually looking at the literature that Tzu Chi is producing. This is very important. And the topic of vegetarianism, it's very popular now, but English studies, not too many yet about Tzu Chi vegetarianism. And Tzu Chi has been promoting vegetarianism for years and years and years. They have, we all know it, vegetarianism for all ages. Written materials, audio, visual materials. Tzu Chi around the world, they promote vegetarianism, workshops, exhibits, cooking classes, cookbooks, fairs, charity sales, night markets, and the foundation and university promote academic research on vegetarianism. And I know there's Chinese research on vegetarianism, but we really need more English books about Tzu Chi vegetarianism, extremely important. Also, vegetarianism is inseparable from Tzu Chi's environmental protection programs. There are a number of books about recycling, but there should be more, actually. And I recently actually finished an article about Master Shangren's 大斋教育, and illustrated by Ling Wanqi. So I really love the art of Tzu Chi, and I love about vegetarianism of Tzu Chi. It's really important. So Professor Heller's research really is important, to look at the pictures too. Very important. And I do recommend her book, Literature for Little Bodhisattvas. Do you know she has a whole book about this? I don't know if it's over here. The 书在那边吗？她的书就是说 well, anyway, I mean, what do you say, 那个 little bodhisattvas 的那个书? Okay, anyway, but this research on Tzu Chi is part of a book about other picture books too. So that book is called Literature for Little Bodhisattvas. So I hope we can all read that soon. And Right, so I just wanted to confirm that if the 3 strategies you just mentioned are unique to Tzu Chi, for example, you said, okay, animals anthropomorphized, scientific, language and concepts, and the representation of children as religious agents. Are those 3 strategies especially for Tzu Chi, or do other groups use it too, like Fa Gu Shan or Fo Guan Shan or something like that? Is that what you were saying, or should you answer it now or later? Like. Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if those strategies are special to Tzu Chi, or do other groups use them too, like Fo Guangshan or something?
I would say that I can explain this in 2 ways. First of all, anthropomorphizing animals is not distinct to any Buddhist organization or any religious organization.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. There's there's no. I don't think there's any children's literature anywhere that if you went into any bookstore, if you pulled off the shelf 5 books, 4 of them would have animals that looked cute. So that is common to children's books. Also common to, I'd say, most Buddhist literature is treating children as religious agents, that they can take on religious action, or that's something that a phenomenon that I would identify with late 20th century, early 21st century Taiwanese Buddhist picture books. Okay. So that the earlier ones maybe not as much, but there's kind of a change in how we see children, right, in the late 20th century and early 21st century. What's distinct, I would say, is the emphasis on scientific education within Tzu Chi books. So the way these 3 come together is what distinguishes Tzu Chi.
The way it comes together, okay. Good. And so that's great. And I think, we laugh, oh, kawaii, and then in Japanese it's kawaii, right? And there's actually been a lot of research about this. It's very important in politics, in gender relations, in popular culture. And someone at Zhong Yuan, Terry Silvio, she wrote a book called Puppets, Gods, and Brands. And she's talking about kawaii in popular religion, anga, those little dolls, those little wawa, and so this 中研院的老师他写一本书关于anga. So it's very serious. It's a really good book. So this cute, we say, oh, kawaii, but actually I think it's a very serious topic, because it's talking about empathy, right? And empathy is a Buddhist notion, but I think more should be talked about kawaii in Buddhism. Like outside, what do we see outside? The little monk, kawaii的那些比丘. Like what's going on with that? The cute monk. Is that from Hanguo ma? Is that from Korea, or what is that? Or is that from? You know how the Korea has that kawaii的比丘ma? Or is it from that old show, Isho Good? Right? I think it's from that, right? Probably. Yeah, Isho Heshang, right? We don't know. EQ, yeah, Isho in Chinese. But then in Taiwan, there are more nuns than monks. I think it should be a kawaii de bichoni, how about? But anyway, I'm just joking. But this is an interesting thing. It's actually, kawaii is very serious. Do you know, there was a scientist in Austria. His name is Konrad Lorenz. Remember, he noticed imprinting, that when an animal the first thing the animal sees, that will be the mother. So he studied geese. 他是研究鹅嘛，然后他把那个鹅从小就养了，然后那个鹅就认为那个男的是他的妈妈。Like imprinting, right? So he also discovered, he said, why do we think baby and little animals are so cute? Because they have a special face, big eyes, big mouth, big face, and so he actually said that's evolutionary. It's evolutionary. So because babies are helpless, and if the baby is cute, the adults will want to take care of it. Will want to, so it's attracting, and or little pet puppies, little kittens, 很可爱, because that attracts us to what? To take care of them. So it's actually it's some kind of psychological thing, right? And he actually invented a term. It's called Kinshensima. That's German. It means a baby face, and it makes us feel attracted. We are attracted. Why? We want to take care of. 我们觉得可爱，所以要照顾. That's the key point there. So the key point is empathy, and you mentioned it too, empathy, 同情嘛. And that's very important. This is what needs to be researched further. What Buddhism talks about, human and animals, and empathy. And in, you know, because we have, Chinese Buddhism has this long history of hu sheng, jie sha, right? And it's a very long history in Chinese Buddhism. And the heart of it is, 不杀生, 真的不要杀生, but the most important thing is to develop empathy, 同心嘛, 慈悲心嘛, 要培养慈悲心嘛. And when you read the old Chinese poems, they're always talking about 同体, right? 大悲同体 or something like that. 大悲, yeah, so 同体, and then Yin Shun, Master Yin Shun, he's whatever, he said, when we take refuge in the Dharma, the 5 wu jie, when we take the precepts from today until the end of my life, I will protect life. This is the major vow. The precepts are based on compassion's empathetic method. So 自通之法, 自通. It means like 我跟你同体, 所以我同情你. So that's what Yin Shun Fasher said. The empathetic method. And so I think we really should study this more about humans, animals, empathy, and somehow it's all related with ka'ai. I don't know how, but it's somewhere in there. And as I said before, you know, well, as Professor Heller said, you know, children's literature always talked about anthropomorphized animals that look like people, that act like people. Aesop's fables, right? But Chinese history has a lot of stories about that, about these animals that are, they have Confucian values, and they also have Buddhist values. So, do you know the set of stories, 志怪小说? And inside, there's all these animals that are crying and talking. And Feng Zikai, when Feng Zikai, Hu Sheng Hua Ji, he has a lot of stories about animals crying and like mothers crying for their baby animals. You know, so trying to make you feel empathetic. And so the goal is empathetic. So there's actually, I think more people should study the old books, the old Chinese books. There's a Qing Dynasty one, there's a Ming Dynasty one, there's Feng Zikai used one, he used a lot in his books. Feng Zikai, he wrote 6 books about Hu Sheng Hua Ji, 有6本呢. And there's a lot of those stories in there about people and animals, 有一些同情的关系. So it's very interesting. Actually, more people should study Feng Zikai. My students know I love Feng Zikai, right? And so, but there's not really a lot of English. I mean, there's actually not so much English about Feng Zikai. Or people say, oh, how could I? But they don't know it's like really very profound, you know, 很深刻. Right. So, and science and language, I definitely think that I'm convinced that at Tzu Chi, science is really big. It's the biggest. More than Foguanshan, more than Fagushan. Science and medicine are so important for Tzu Chi's missions, right? So yeah, I totally agree with you. Science, I think that maybe in another life, Shang'an could be a scientist, right? Or a doctor, don't you think so? Because she's really interested in science, and she's always learning more. So I think that's what informs her. That's definitely new. The science is new, the global view is new. Actually in the early 20th century, they were already starting to add science to vegetarianism. But definitely, you know, as far as Tzu Chi is concerned, science, the internet, trends in the global environmental protection movement. I think that's special for Tzu Chi, even more than Bo Guangshan or other places. I think. So anyway, I think that very important, the representation of children as religious agents. But I definitely think that's also, because Shangran wants everyone to learn, be equipped with knowledge, have compassion, and then just do it, put it into action. So bodhisattvas in action. I do think that's a very special Tzu Chi thing. And it's very interesting how the little book right there, the book, the 我愛蔬果, you know, there's no adults, right? No adults inside. There's only children, right? And so children are the main actors, and they lead each other. They lead each other to be vegetarian, which is very good, right? It's not like adults are telling them, you know, blah blah blah. They're being they're active agents. So I think that's very good. That's a really good point that you pointed out. And remember that Tzu Chi has an education system. We have schools, K through 12, and so Tzu Chi is very interested in educating young people. But so in some, Professor Heller's work is not only enlightening in itself, but it points the way to so much other research that, you know, for one lifetime we can never finish all the topics, you know. So I really thank you for your book, and I encourage everyone to go out and read the book. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor DeVido. I think you can understand, and I think that Professor DeVido and Professor Helen, they understand maybe much more than we understood in terms of, those Chinese picture books, especially Feng Kai. I think for young adults in Taiwan, I think most of them just don't know Feng Kai at all, because it's already classical. But because I'm in the field of environmental education for several decades, so I understand that. And you mentioned the 6 books. Yeah.
There's 6 of them.
Yeah. I think that's very important. Okay, I think I can share some of my points of view after I listen to Professor Heller's speech. Because several years ago, one of my PhD students finished research on the sustainable development-oriented picture book, and we tried to develop a book selection criteria for that. So, the several standards for that research actually just I think very coincide with what Professor Helens just mentioned. For example, we find that science is one of the most important elements, especially just like Professor DeVido mentioned. I think science is one of the important characteristics of Tzu Chi's books, especially when Tzu Chi, I think 30 years ago, the Tzu Chi started to mention and to promote the concept of recycling. At that time, now we think, it's common sense. But at that time, people just didn't think of this because we need to practice. And also at that time, our government, the Ministry of the Environment, at that time, that's EPA in Taiwan, started to have to launch the policy of recycling. And also we found that without, I think the Shangren mentioned and emphasized recycling is important, the policy could not be so successful at all. So science, I think in terms of recycling or any other things, I think many books in Tzu Chi's system can find science. Also we have College of Medicine, everything. And also the second part is I think the sustainable development, the whole concept. We emphasize environmentalism, but actually we also emphasize, economy and also society at the same time, because we live in the real world. So it's very real. So also the 上人 also emphasize again and again that we need to incorporate the religion into our daily lives, so everywhere. So also we need to emphasize economics, society, and environment at the same time. And for the other parts, we emphasize that we need to care for nature. It's very important. And also inclusivity, 包容, we find that's very important. It's also about empathy, 同理心, because we just cannot judge others by our own standards. I remember that Professor Heller just mentioned that one species cannot judge other species just based on its own standards. 我们不能用自己的标准去这个判定别人啊。And also literacy and artistry. That's because it's a picture book. In terms of art, there should be something that's very important to make the communication effective. And also realism. So I think that's something that the topics of Professor Helen's speech, materialization. I think this is very important. Vegetables are real things. Animals are real. When the children, they look at the real things, they will have real feelings and the feedbacks. Because they are children, so we just communicate with them with real things instead of those other things that they cannot see or that they cannot smell, the very abstract concepts they can understand. And also, I think one thing that is very important, I think for Professor Helens and Professor DeVido's, they just mentioning all the way something that must be very positive. We emphasize the positive things for children. So the positive orientation is very important for the picture book for sustainable development for children. So I think we have a very common considerations on this. And because I was trained as an engineer in the past, well, for several decades, I think if we just talk to the children, just emphasize the science, engineering, those well, something that we think very realistic, very scientific to them, well, they can, well, have a very good scores in terms of examinations, just like most of the, well, Taiwanese students, but they might just take very little actions. So I think empathy plus knowledge equals to action. That's very important. In terms of environmental education, we always emphasize the 3 stages: knowledge, attitude, and action. I think it's very important. And for most of the research, we found that attitude or awareness is the real drivers for action. And the knowledge plays a, well, very important role, but that's just a background. And the real driver is attitude or awareness. So I think for the picture book, if we can use a picture book to persuade or remind our children, this is important. We need to think of things, use the mindset of the bear or the mindset of the vegetable. I think, well, it's real for them. And I think that will be something that is important when they were very young. And when they grow up, this will be a root for many things in the future. And that's something that I found and I can reflect after I listened to the very inspiring speech of Professor Heller. So that's that's my term, okay? And I think maybe after this, where we share the questions to the audience. Okay. Anybody? 我们任何在场的朋友，一些想法可以分享的话，都欢迎您提出来。中文、英文都可以。来，王师兄。
I'm very honored to join this sharing and the discuss. I think because Professor Ye is mentioned about the knowledge and the attitude, and the most important part to affect the action is the manner or the attitude. So I'm so curious that why this play a more important role than knowledge to impact the action. So may I know your reason, background about this statement? Yeah.
Well, okay, I just answered that question very briefly because according to the research, if we just take the questionnaire and you just conduct some statistical analysis, you found that the correlations among these variables, the correlation between awareness or attitude to action, very, very, very strong. But for knowledge, we found that sometimes it's very weak, and in some very special cases, they have a negative correlationships because, with somebody, they think they know a lot. They intend to do very little. So, for scientists, engineers, I found that because I'm engineer. In the groups, they found, I know that, so it's not important at all. But especially according to some surveys conducted in these years, for the college students, the female students from the College of Art, they had the most, I think the most positive environmental literacy compared with others. So I think according to research, and you can find that because people think it's important, and they don't try to understand the details of science to do action. Just do that. I think this is very important.
If I can add something that, as you were talking, one of the things that I was struck by is the fact that you mentioned positive action. And I think the knowledge part, especially when we're talking about environmentalism, that knowledge part on climate change is often quite negative and difficult, right? It's bad news. And so if you only have the knowledge part, there's maybe not something that's going to make you take action. And so you need that kind of positive attitude or that emotional connection to something beyond oneself to prompt one into taking action.
Yeah, then we say that the hopefulness, 希望感, is very important. Otherwise, we just mention, the global warming, the world will end. We cannot just think about that. We need that, for save those people, to save those animals, we need to take action. That's a positive actions. So any other questions or comments? All comments are welcomed. 各位还没有任何的想法都可以分享。像王师兄刚这个分享的，其实就是一个问题，但是我们也可以有一些讨论嘛。各位还有没有各位师兄师有没有任何的想法都可以。陈哲林师兄有没有什么想法？
我最近有到全省去做环境讲师的培训，但是总觉得他们可以吸收，他们可以理解，但是距离行动感觉还是有差了一步。然后还有就是说，他即使可以去 有所行动。那我不知道如何再去感染更多人来一起行动，我觉得这才是应该是一个关键的哈。那我不知道教授他们对如何去引起更多人来一起来行动有什么更好的方法？
Adults, right? Yeah. I think that that's an interesting question from my perspective, since I've worked so much on children's literature, right? And that we might think about this as a kind of generational change, that one of the positive effects or one of the values of children's literature is that it can create those kinds of changes in younger people, whereas sometimes it's harder to get older people to change and to be motivated to do new things. And I think that there's still, I was today reading some research about sort of cultivating those, what we were just talking about, these kind of empathetic, tongti, the ideals. And it tends to be very theoretical and not, this kind of discourse is very theoretical and not practical. So I think you are right that we need to think about more practical ways to motivate people. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. Do you want to share this?
Just beat them.
Really?
Oh no.
师兄当然提到这个问题，因为我们刚刚讨论是小朋友嘛，这是对成人的，就大人的问题，大人世界很复杂了啊。I think it's also applied to the concept of complexity, because complexity means we don't have the sole and the correct answer for any kinds of questions. We can look at the things with different points of view. 就我们可以用不同的角度看一件事情，所以这是没有标准答案的。For my point of view, I think communication is very important. So for people like us, there's some special strategies for 慈济人. But for the general people, maybe we need to have some other strategies to inspire or invite them to do something that we want them to do. So that's according to the research of environmental education. We always, talk about the issues, how to communicate with people effectively. A kind of strategies. Yeah, maybe you can share, yeah.
Is the expert on motivating people. Like the community, right? First get people involved in their community. I think 动员社区的人嘛 ，but I mean 慈济是专家嘛，他们最会动员嘛。But 是不是您的意思是说非慈济人没有兴趣，或者？
对，就是可能慈济人会比较理解，但是非慈济人比较这方面身体力行。的一个动力比较少，比如说我们说要带随身五宝，要带环保杯、环保碗、环保筷、手帕、购物袋，那应该是慈济人80%都做到了，但是可能不是慈济人，可能是80%没有做到，那就是如何去。让这些没有做到的提升他能做到的一个百分比，或是增加他的行动力，这样子。
Yeah, that's hard. I don't know. I'm just.
Obviously, it's hard. It's a hard question, but because it's not so easy, so we need to do more research. Or just try as we can to persuade or to invite people to do things that we think they need to do. But I think, I agree with Professor DeVido that Tzu Chi is the expert 动员 or inspiring people. Because as you can see, well, for the whole world, we have so many 师兄师姐 around the world. So I think well, we are one of the most important driving force to influence more people. 我们今天的讨论的时间哈，我想也差不多了哈。原来我们安排的时间差不多就在这个时候。那我想在结束之前哈，我们一般呢，我们都会再邀请我们的演讲者跟我们今天的这个讨论者哈，这个在很简短的时间用几句话来回顾一下哈，然后也给一个结论，我们今天整个讨论。So in the end, I will invite you to have some words to conclude today's event. Yeah.
First of all, thank you all for coming and for Tzu Chi's work in environmental protection. Even though there are people who are not yet persuaded, I think Tzu Chi has done a lot to move change forward in many different places. And second of all, I want to thank Elise and Professor DeVido for their responses. I really appreciate learning about the approaches to sustainable development. I think that's a really useful dimension, and I appreciate Professor DeVito's encouragement for us all to expand what we think of as research topics, and I think she laid out a number of really important research topics that I would also love to see people take up as we sort of move forward and have a broader sense of what Buddhism is and how it works in society. So I think with that, I will just thank you again for coming this evening.
Okay, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. Please. No. 每个人都简短说几句话。
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Oh, but thank you so much, everyone. And it's just really, Tzu Chi is the most inspirational. I wish Shangen could be the president of the world. I wish she could be the world leader, because, you know, she really would bring peace to the world. But thank you very much, and I enjoy the rest of your summer, and everyone stay healthy. Thank you.
OK， 谢谢大家今天晚上的光临。我希望哈，我们当这样的讨论对各位来讲，我想各位慈济的师兄姐都已经在这个领域是专家，而且各位都身体力行了非常久。那我非常期待呢，未来在 Professor 这个 Helen 他今天给我们的这些鼓励还有给我们的这些讯息下面呢，将来我们可以有更多的知识，还有我们也有更多的策略，能够把我们的想法传递给更多的人。非常感谢各位，谢谢。
非常感恩3位教授的分享与交流。现在我们也恭请德环法师上台颁赠结缘品给3位教授。我们也将结束直播，感恩线上观众与我们一起精进。我们就请德环法师。